All right, we're going to welcome to the stage the incredible creative team that has really rocked not just the comic book world, but every aspect of the publishing world with this amazing book. First up, the legendary writer, Mr. Tom Waltz. Absolutely incredible colorist, Luis Delgado. One half of the incredible team that brought the action and character to life, Isao Escorza. And the other half of that team, Isaac Escorza. Up next, the turtle killer himself, Mr. Ben Bishop. And ladies and gentlemen, last but not least, you may have heard of him. I've seen a few people in his line today. The one and only Mr. Kevin Eastman. Kevin's got all kinds of questions. Awesome. Yep, jump on right in there. Thank you, Kevin. Man, what a team up here, ladies and gentlemen.
Turtle killer.
The turtle. A lot of blood on his hands down there. I don't, you know, this is an interesting time having Ben Bishop up here. I think you've recently gotten a new license plate identifying yourself as a turtle killer.
Yeah, have you seen that TMNT killer Bronco out there? Pretty proud of that thing. Yeah.
It's awesome, man. Well, New York best time selling crew right up here, y'all. How does that feel to be on the best sellers list? What's that like? Man. I'll tell you what. So where to start? There's so much to unpack with this incredible series. I mean, it's changed the landscape. Kevin, you've seen this thing through since the '80s, and just going back to the roots of the creative process that you started with Mirage. Maybe kick us off talking a little bit about that creative process and getting in the driver's seat on this one.
Well, my system of working is basically let everybody else do all the work and I just take all the credit. It works out really good. No, going back to the earliest days of when Pete and I worked together, it was really a complete collaboration where it was one idea would lead to another goofy idea and would keep merging those two together as we sort of built out the original concept, the original origin. And our barometer was always laughter. If it made us laugh and it's something we loved and we enjoyed and we wanted to see, because we wrote it specifically for ourselves. It wasn't really written for, like, hey, if we make them turtles, we'll sell more copies, or we would take the approach this way or that, we'll, you know, the fans will love it. It was really written for two original fans, which was Pete and I, so we really used that as the original source, the original passion, and then to try to pay respect and homage to so many of the people that we stand on the shoulders of that inspired us when we were kids. You guys like Jack Kirby and so many other writers and artists in the early days that, you know, would be the ones that would get in trouble because we'd be up in our room reading comic books instead of doing our chores or our homework or all those things. So it was sort of putting all those things together into one giant thank you note, which became the first issue of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. When we did the first issue, it was done to be a single issue because we never thought we'd sell enough of the first issue to do a second issue. And then this crazy thing happened is you guys bought them. And right here in the birthplace of the Turtles, which, you know, you guys know was all born in Dover, New Hampshire, right? So this is home turf. We own this country right here. We own this is it. No, so it was that was how the first issue started. We produced it, we sold it. We were grateful that we sold that many because we paid my uncle back, my Uncle Quentin, who lived here in Manchester, New Hampshire, when he loaned us the $1,200 to do the first issue. And so we could pay him back, but then we started getting these calls of people asking for, well, when's issue 2 coming? And when Pete and I were like, well, we never thought there'd be a second issue, or we'd never have an opportunity to do a second issue. And that's really where it all started. So the issues kept going and going, oh, thank you, and selling. And to us, starting with issue 2, it was really a special moment because that was when the dream came true. For however long it lasted, Pete and I had finally stepped into or sat behind our favorite, again, our inspirations, those original comic artists and writers that inspired us. And we were living the dream, a childhood dream of writing and drawing comics for a living. And that was the most important, the most precious thing in the world. So I'm going to jump, fast forward to the birthplace of the Last Ronin. When Peter and I had gotten to issue 11 of the Turtles, it was a point where we'd wrapped up a fairly large story arc, a couple series of story arcs, but we sort of had the Turtles in Northampton, and we'd wrapped up a big moment, and we had them all together as a family again, which included the one-shots on each individual Turtles. And we kind of thought, like, looking down the road, where do we go from here? Where do we go next? And we said, well, let's look 30 years in the future, which this was 1987, so we were looking into 2017. And we said, what would be, say, the final Turtle story? That's it. The sort of issue 1 was the beginning. What's the final story going to be? And then this crazy thing happened. Is that was also the same year that we started developing the toys, the cartoons. The first cartoon series came out in 1987, that Christmas break. In 1987, and then the first toys came out in 1988, and then the time to do this story that Pete and I wanted to do just evaporated. We were now in full control of all things Turtles and having a great time, but the creative on the comics drifted away. But we had this story that was sort of set aside, and then it was, 5 years passed, 10 years passed, 20 years passed, and things had changed. And so I'm going to jump way over to how the Last Ronin then was born. The guy on the other end here, the incredible genius, my best bud, Tom Waltz. Tom Waltz has accomplished something that very few writers in the world of comics have ever been able to take credit for, and that is writing 100 issues in a row of a comic book and writing 100 brilliant issues in a row. And so with that foundation, that incredible foundation, working with these incredibly talented, Tom is a writer, we were blessed with so many gifted and talented artists that helped bring these stories and these ideas together. As we were heading towards issue 100, and I remember, and I'm going to let Tom talk in a minute because it's fun. As I remember when we first started, it was like, well, if we could just get 1 year out of this, it would be great.
At first it was just 4 issues.
Just 4.
Now 4 issues.
But I want him to go back to the where it started at IDW. But so anyway, so just on the Last Ronin moment, and we'll go back a little bit. But on the Last Ronin moment, we were heading into 2018. We couldn't believe we were seeing issue 100 in our sights. And as Tom and I would have these chats of we'd have these mind melt meetings. We'd have the chats of well, where do we go after issue 100? And one day I sort of dusted off this idea that Pete and I originally had, and I showed it to Tom. And I said, what do you think about what we developed this? And this sort of take it to issue 100, then jump to another sort of our Dark Knight version of the Turtles, sort of set within its own universe, leaning towards a Mirage universe. Let's jump to that and bring that to life. And the coolest part about bringing that to life, it was very... nothing will ever replace what Peter and I did and how we worked, but Tom and I on this issue in particular, it was very much like those days with Peter where one idea led to another idea. We had this fun foundation, but there was a lot of things we needed to fill in. So one idea led to the next, and so it was a back and forth, right up until, we'd be changing and tweaking dialogue on a Sunday night before it went to press on Monday, and so it was a real true birthing process and quite painful. Exciting, but quite painful at times. So, so that's where that takes us to Last Ronin, and we should introduce these guys.
Well, so for you guys that are jumping in here, tell us what it was like when you found out you were on this project, because that obviously Turtles and Ben, I know, seen pictures of you in the sleeping bag back in the day, and standing next to Steve Levine in a foam suit. What was it like to be able to jump on board with this project and help bring this vision to life, you guys?
Luis?
No, they said Ben.
Okay. All right.
This goes for all of you.
I say it every panel, and I almost start to cry, and it's just like it's freaking crazy. I've always loved Turtles. I have sleeping bags that Steve drew, and I just have always wanted to be, a part of that history, and to be such a big part of, especially, such a big book has been insane, and just, it doesn't feel real, and now there's going to be toys, and hopefully we can get a movie one day, and I hope it just keeps going, but more so than that, we're able to tell new stories with those old characters and also some new characters.
Well, hopefully they make new sleeping bags so we can replace the other ones.
I'll probably draw on the
There are
sleeping
lunch
bags.
pails.
Yeah, I've seen the lunch boxes. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, great.
Yeah, Isaac.
Que digas qué es lo que tu opinión, pero what's the question? Like,
Yeah, so what was it like being able, when you found out you were on this project, this legendary piece here?
Pues definitivamente
Definitely
es la mejor
the
experiencia de
best
trabajo
experience ever
de la vida.
in their lives.
Jamás trabajamos con alguien como Kevin.
They've never worked
del
with
tamaño
anyone
de
the
todo el
size of
equipo.
Kevin and the whole team.
Entonces fue increíble
So it
cuando
was
esto
incredible.
comenzó.
it all
No
began,
sabíamos de dónde cayó.
They didn't know where it fell. It fell from the sky for
Ya
them.
con el paso del tiempo, pues hemos conocido la historia
So-
con más detalles.
So when the time they understood the story better and every detail,
Pero sí ha sido una cosa increíble
but
que
it's been incredible
todavía no nos cae el
that
20.
they haven't actually realized what's going on.
I'm going to,
¿Cómo te sientes?
this you,
What?
Pues para comentar que pues en un principio
At the
no
beginning,
teníamos ni idea
they didn't have any idea
de lo grande que iba a
How
ser el
big
proyecto.
it was gonna be.
Lo tomamos como un trabajo
They just took it
simplemente,
as a project,
y pues ahora nos ha sorprendido
and
mucho
now they have it blew
la
them from the
acogida que ha
feet.
tenido toda la gente,
How much
a
you
la que
guys
le
love it,
agradecemos
and they thank you guys for everything, for the love.
I want to have Tom. I want Tom to go back to the beginning in a minute, but I'm going to fill in a few quick blanks here, which includes Lewis, and then we're going to get on to, because I want Lewis to speak too. But that's also so. A couple quick things. You know, as Last Ronin came together, much as it was a happy accident for Tom and I to sort of start building the building blocks and sort of taking this to where we wanted to be Last Ronin, we were very lucky that the art team for this project fell together so beautifully and so perfectly. And that being that we, dear friend Andy Kuhn, who was originally brought on to be the series artist, had to step away from the project. And so we were both kind of scratching at, like, so looking at who do we choose, who's next, what kind of artists could we work with? And we have to blame my wife for both of the artists involved. One was when we were working on an individual project called Drawing Blood. We were looking for an artist for that, David Avalone and myself. And my wife, Ben had just sent me a book called The Aggregate that he had self-published. He grew out of that self-publishing Kickstarter program. And Courtney had said, well, what about this guy? He's pretty good. So we ended up bringing Ben in to do a main series artist on Drawing Blood. And so that evolution was, that track was going, so we got friendly with Ben, and we were huge fans of his talent. And so back to the main artist for the Last Ronin, when Andy stepped away, I had a really, really good fortune with Heavy Metal Magazine that the Escorza brothers had done not only Tana, a 4-issue Tana series based on one of the most iconic heavy metal characters, but we had also worked on a story together. It was an 8-page story for one of the issues that I wrote it out, and they just brought it to life in such a brilliant way. We met Esau at one of the Lamole Comicons, and had given my wife a beautiful drawing, and it was sitting, it was like on her wall in her office. And again, Tom and I were beating around artists, and Courtney said again, these guys were really good. And I said, you're right. So I showed this to Tom, and Tom was like, dude, I'm all in with that. And then again, we had the Escorza brothers, and we knew we wanted that to be the here and now, sort of our Dark Knight version of the Turtles. We talked in great detail about these flashback sequences, and kind of like if we had Dark Knight on the one hand and a Batman Year One sort of on the other, and we said Ben Bishop would be the guy that could bring that to life so beautifully, because he's so great with the acting and the emotion and the things. And so David and I literally took Ben, who's co-owner of the property, we took our main series artist off our own book.
I made a joke when things were changing, and I was like, well, if you need any help, let me know. And I'm on page like 100 of 209,000 or something. Way too busy and wanted it, but yeah.
And he was in. And so, Ben, that's where you get this dreadful name, the Turtle Killers,
Yeah.
because...
I got them all except the last one.
The last one.
Yeah.
But no, it was just great. So it was a beautiful package. And then I think there was no other colorist that Tom had in mind, except Luis Antonio Delgado, who colored not only the brothers' sequences, but Ben's sequences. And with that, let me hand it off, because that sets the stage how this amazing team came together.
What's it like for you, Luis?
Well, It was amazing from the beginning because I've been working with IDW and Tom for like 15 years, and I grew up watching all this stuff. I mean, I started with Ghostbusters, and Ghostbusters, as you know, did a TMNT crossover. So for me, that was the first time I did Turtles, and I was really excited and felt like a kid. I loved Michelangelo since I was a kid. I had my own skateboard that I never learned to use, and but I had it. I won it for my birthday, and I had it, and I used to put Band-Aids on my elbows, pretending I was a turtle when I was a kid. I have pictures somewhere, but I'm never gonna show them. But then then Ghostbusters stopped. And then there was an opportunity for the colorist, and Tom just reached out to me and told me, there's a tryout. Do you want to do it? Of course I did. I stopped everything else. I went out, and I think it took me less than 24 hours to send it back. And I was just waiting. I mean, it was painful to wait because he said that Kevin liked my stuff, but they had to get approval from Nickelodeon. And I was just like praying, and let's hope we can do this. And then Nickelodeon said yes. They approved me for the project, and then that's where I started working with the project. But the best part was, I remember when I was doing Ghostbusters and TMNT, I had no contact with Kevin, just with Tom. And so I didn't actually know him. But now with The Last Ronin, we start like exchanging emails, and he told me, hey, bro. And I talked to my friends, like, Kevin Eastman called me bro. Now I made it. So and now I'm here.
That's awesome. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the book is how you all change. I mean, changing styles is classic Mirage, right? When you look at every artist and every turtle iteration and bringing that all together in the book to tell those different storylines. And Luis, the way you change colors from one story to the next, it's just, it's miraculous. And Tom, from a storytelling standpoint, I mean, obviously, when you see what happens to the turtles, it hits hard. Anyone get some tears in your eyes and as you're going? Yeah, Splinter and Donnie Page, man, my two tops. Tom, y'all were killing me in that. You've done it to me twice, IDWN now. What's going on? Talk to me about that process and how you all decided how they would go out, because when you think about what Splinter's a really intelligent being, right? And then looking at them charging into this. I was listening to the Turtle
Wait,
Tracks
has everybody
podcast.
read this book?
Yeah.
Spoilers
Sorry.
ahead.
Spoiler alert.
They're all dead.
Too late.
If you hadn't read it, go grab some copies off of Kevin and Ben's table. There's some there for you. But when you were trying to figure out how they went out, I think it was tough to watch that process. But I heard what you said on the Turtle Tracks podcast about it coming back to a revenge story, and in that space, like the mind just goes to a different world, right?
Yeah, and originally when Kevin and I started, we were really leaning really heavily into the Mirage. Matter of fact, we thought this was going to be the end of the Mirage story, but it was pretty quickly we figured out this isn't a Mirage story. This is a whole new Turtle story. So, but we wanted to stay true to the core, even with the IDW book all those years. As different as it is, at its core, it's still a Turtle story, and anything Turtles is about family. But what Kevin was really wanting us to lean into was that revenge aspect, which was a big key to the core to the Mirage series. And, I guess even to the movies to a certain extent, was that there was this vendetta between these two families. I mean, there was just unsolved bloody business between two families that went way back, in their personal histories. And so what Kevin was saying was like, this is the culmination of that, and it has to be these two families still. So it happens to be the Last Ronin, and it happens to be, the descendant of the Shredder, which is Hiroto. And so we knew that right in and of itself is just kind of a violent kind of a way of telling a story. Even if there is no violence, just the idea that there's revenge that's waiting to happen, that there's vendettas that are being played out. So we knew that it could never be pretty. This was not going to be pretty. It wasn't this. As much as you want to talk about honor and redemption and all that stuff, ultimately it's like Hatfields and McCoys. And is there honor in that, or is it just two families that just maybe you should sit down and talk and figure this thing out? But they're not going to. They're way past that, to the point where in the story, actually the hardest thing for us, it wasn't the death so much, because we talked about the deaths early on, and we kind of knew, we built around those things, and we said, what if they die, Donnie dies here? What if Raph will be the first one to go, because he's the hothead, and he's just going to dive into this thing? And it was kind of one of those things where we weren't constrained. There was this was like Nickelodeon, to their credit, they said, go for it. We want you to tell a story, and it's going to be a violent story, and even more so, I think. I mean, a lot of people will say, and I think you agree with me on this, Kevin. They'll say, "Oh, those Mirage stories were so gritty and they were so violent," but they were. But I think sometimes people remember them even more violent than they were.
Yep.
We actually ratcheted it up from that level, and they allowed us to do that. And it's hard. This is like a brand that's goes across ages, you know, from little children to adults, and you don't. It's hard to kind of mess with the brand, you know, because some people will say, "Oh my God, Turtles are so violent," but they said, "No, this story needs to be right." And Kevin had a vision, and they're like, "Let's just go and see what happens." So we knew the deaths were going to be violent. What was the hardest thing I felt like in the story was we had to find a way in all that violence to, in the end, tell the story that this was about a family, but it was about that family. That wasn't about the family with the vendetta, the family with this long bloody history. It was about the new family that the Last Ronin finds, and there's redemption in that. Like there's hope. At the end, there's hope in all this carnage, you know. And it was hard. It was hard for us. The funny thing is, people will say, "Oh, I cried when I read it. How did you do that to me?" And even though we knew it and we wrote it, when those pages came in, it choked me up. You know, because it's like, when you see it, you're like, "Oh my God, we did it. This is terrible. People are gonna hate us." You know, this is. But I felt like, that felt like, okay, now if it does this to me, and I've been talking to Kevin about this for 2 years, and it still hits me like this, what's gonna do to people outside? Now, what happened was thank you guys, by the way above and beyond anything we ever expected to happen with this book. But thank you. But so for us, the challenge was never the death. We knew that death was going to happen. What the challenge was for Kevin and I was like, how do we come out of this and the reader won't feel jaded, the reader won't feel depressed, they won't feel like all this for what? Because that to me is the point is, what is the point of revenge? I mean, what are you going to resolve? Nothing. Nothing will get solved. And what you're going to have more angry people that are going to want revenge later on. So in the end, when Kevin said, "I wanted this Casey Marie character that was Casey's daughter," she's our linchpin in this, and in April to a certain degree too. But April's even kind of caught up in the past because if you read the book, she's still prepping for a war. She knows, oh well, we're still at war with the Foot Clan, and for Casey, the young ones are always get pulled into these things. So what we wanted to do was, the most important thing for me coming out of this story was that at the end, you realize, what was the most important thing? Was it the revenge? No. For Michelangelo, what was it? And if you haven't read it, close your ears. But it's like that reunion at the end, you know, whether you believe in heaven or Valhalla or whatever you want to call it, what mattered the most was he got to go back in a loving way to his family. And in the end, Casey Marie, you see, they're going to build this new family from love, from honor, and real kind of a real purpose. Doesn't mean you can't fight bad guys. Right. I mean, comics would be boring if you didn't have bad guys to fight. But the thing is, like, maybe now it's not about vendetta. It's about justice. It's about moving forward. And I think they did a really good job of that. It was just kind of a coincidence. I really like this new Batman movie with Robert Pattinson because that was the message in that movie. He was all about what he thought was, I'm vengeance and I'm going to get this. In the end, he realized all I'm doing is creating more vengeance. I'm making people think this is okay. Yeah. What was the most important thing? Lifting the little girl up into the helicopter and saving somebody. And that was, I think, the biggest challenge for us. It was never about death. Sometimes the biggest challenge is about life. And that was what the book, to me, this book is about living.
Yeah. Yep. Well said. Yep.
Yeah, very much so. That's a master class in writing right there, I'll tell you what. There's so many iconic moments in this, and so much of it is so serendipitous, from Mikey being the first turtle to the last turtle. But the Fugitoids also held a really special place in the entire series. Kevin, talk a little bit about, the Fugitoid, and that goes back to Gobbledygook, right? So right in the early days, and was that always the plan for him to be there at the end and play that space?
That was one of the beautiful things that evolved with Tom and I evolving the story, and it goes back to the original notes. I've got it was great because back in the early days, Pete and I would like handwrite everything, but then Pete started playing around with this newfangled thing. It was a computer. So he started playing with this computer, and so he would type everything out that we talked about and then add to it, and then would do it. So I had this printout, and it's the one I showed Tom. And with that, we kind of went through and we picked certain moments that we liked out of that we felt, well, this is a great base for, like, how the ninjas were, these zombified, half robot, half a human cyber ninjas. There were so many different pieces, but one of our favorite pieces in both was a page out of Pete's sketchbook that he was showing things like what the iPhone was going to be, or his version of the iPhone. It was going to be a mini computer. This is an '87, right? Mini computer you hold in your hand and can do all the.
He was like,
to the
you'll
point where
watch your news on it.
and
He's
it was
like,
a
it's gonna
flip
have
phone.
An
It looked
LCD
like-
screen, and it'll run for 2 hours.
It's like, but the funny, and I don't mean to interrupt, but that was the part where I was like, I said, okay, I really like this outline, Kevin, but we're gonna have to change things because apparently Pete was Nostradamus. All this stuff exists. So if we go with this story, it's not a futuristic story. It's actually like 1999.
Yeah.
So
It's crazy, and that was, but the other on that same page was this, and that was one of the ideas that Pete and I had in the original thing, and Pete did this beautiful sketch, again, right out of a sketchbook, of the Fugitoid's head. Something had happened, and we hadn't even had written, that wasn't written in the original notes that Pete and I had, but at a moment that, the Fugitoid needed to come back to help, and April goes to in her lab, because she was a scientist at that time, as she was in the original stuff, and she pulls the Fugitoid head out, and so from I'd say probably the key building blocks were 40%, 50%. They were there, the pieces there. Then I elaborated on them, Tom elaborated on, and then from that we started recrafting and building the story, even like looking, all right, 2000, by the time we started talking about it, it was 2018. It was already a year past when Pete and I had said it, 30 years prior. And so what is it going to look like? What time period are we going to have this happen? So the Fugitoid's evolution in that story, it was we broke it out in broad strokes, but it continued to build throughout that story. That's the beauty of writing, and it's like it is the same. The process is the same for me as it is for Tom, and that when we are writing and that kind of stuff is evolving, it's like from something that we've talked about, and then once you start the actual process of laying out, or in Tom's case, writing it out, that's when everything, you see the pieces start fitting together, and that's when you have those wonderful happy accidents where you've had this splinter here, and you know it in your mind, and it's going to go here, but you're not sure where, but you know it's going to be here somewhere, and then as you arrive there, and it's almost like you're not as in control as you think you are in some cases, because it sort of almost writes itself. So those moments were great, and like that whole resolution and how that all came together. So many of the moments in that story were born out of that collaboration. And then, the best part of some of that stuff too, and I want to, again, tip it back to the artist, because it was, the story that we wrote, and even some of the layouts I did, the stuff that I would pass off to Ben, and with the stuff especially with the Escorza brothers, because you might have noticed I don't speak Spanish very well. They don't speak English as well. If they do, they're not letting us know yet.
He's laughing.
So I'd send them basically, and that was the fun part. It's like, I'd send them the layouts, and it would be a basic script, and they just saw it, and they brought it to life in such an amazing way, because there weren't final designs in some of this stuff, or there weren't final anything. So they were literally sort of handed this off, and they brought their A game to the creative development of that story. So that was really, when you talk about that, and just so many looks that Ben brought to the story. Everything happened as it went along, and that's the beauty of the evolution. It's almost, I want to say it was like directing a movie, but in some ways it felt like,
I always say it was probably the most organic writing experience I've ever had, because it would literally be like to the last second things would change, because we just felt like there was something guiding us. I always use this is, if you've heard this from me before, I'm sorry, I repeat this a lot, but when people ask, how does the storytelling happen? How do you write stories or whatever? And I always say, anybody see that movie Heat? The movie Heat, and there's a part where Robert De Niro goes to the computer hacker guy, and he gives him the bank schematics. He's like, shoot, you could build a bank with this. Where do you get this? And he goes, it's just out there, man. You just got to know how to grab it. And I said, that's like everybody, I think everybody in this world has that radar, it may be for something different. My dad's a carpenter. He can take this table and probably turn it into an even better table. I could make a bonfire with this table because that's about what I can do with wood. You know what I mean? But the stories, like, I never, it's you know, I don't have zero ego, but they talk about talent and stuff and natural talent, but I think we just all have a radar, and that happens to be mine. I see those patterns, and Kevin's right there with me, and I think the artists see the same thing, and they just know how to render those things out, just like somebody can, like Pete. Pete definitely had a science mind, and it blew my mind when I saw the outline. Like I said, I started cracking up. I was like, none of this is like old-fashioned stuff now. He was way ahead of his time, you know. But I think we can all channel things. But what's funny in this case, it was kind of like simultaneously, Kevin and I were like just locked into this radar with this story, and we would both know. We would say, just not right, but we're going in the right direction. And there'd be a point where we'd say, that's it, and just leave it alone, and move on.
So it really was. I mean, that's, again, just to repeat or sum up, it was, I did an afterword in the collected, and I just said it was a dream team, and it really was a dream team because it was like the perfect combination, the opportunities. The Scorzers had just come off a project, and they were available. Ben and our buddy David, you know, of our own project, you know, we were able to pull Ben aside and then have him focus and become part of that story, and that was like, so many pieces fell together just so wonderfully organic and so perfectly to, you know, the whole team to make it happen the way it did. And so that's what made it
The whole
amazing.
thing was crazy collaborative because, as you know, they came out in a weird schedule, but we're literally working on it the whole time. It would come out, everyone except maybe Kevin would breathe for a day. I'd watch all the YouTube reviews and be like, oh, when do we start the next one? When do we start the next one? And we'd go right into it, but that involved, you know, sets, locations, designs, and a lot of times there wasn't a lot of time for that. So Kevin's like, I've gone here, keep going, go that way. And then you would send stuff to the brothers for like the big turtle tank and things like that. It was just so cool. And then Louise would be like, oh, that Sin City cover with the red moon is pretty cool. We should do that in the Raphael scene. And they were like, okay. Like everyone was just on board for good ideas.
Yeah, that was great. And that's you know, the best part of that kind of creative process. If you have an unfortunate experience as a creator working with someone that has too big of an ego to recognize a good idea, then the project's doomed. But if you get a bunch of people that actually are smart and know, like, you know, dude, that's a really good idea, wherever it comes from, take advantage of it, because that's what makes it beautiful.
And never be afraid to steal. No, I'm just kidding.
And then, you know, if these guys weren't here, Tom and I would be taking all the credit.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks. That's an incredible answer. And to think that the TurtleCom could have been the first iPhone, you know, if you just created that branch of Mirage Studios and technology there.
The shell phone.
The shell phone, that's it. That's it. Well, I want to turn it over to you all and ask some questions. So if you've got a question, feel free to jump here in front of the microphone. Go ahead and start lining up. And as you're doing that, as we're looking forward, I know we've all heard about a little project called The Lost Years that's coming up. I don't know what can be said, but you know,
Let's just tell everything.
just tell everything. That's
This is the first real full Last Ronin panel, right?
yeah,
yeah.
It's crazy.
It is.
So,
We're
yeah.
This
all-
is the last Ronin panel.
The first.
That's it.
First real last.
it's the first last.
Yeah, we've
First,
never
last,
all been
last.
on a panel together. So it's time to tell you everything that's coming. No.
It was all lies. Nothing,
It was a
nobody
dream.
died.
That was
No, so what we're planning, and you know, I don't know if anybody here knows, but I also work at IDW in an editorial capacity, so I'm kind of behind the scenes, even in a meta fashion with this book. When Kevin and I first started, we had thoughts about sequels and other stories, but we weren't. We just knew that we had to get Last Run done. We had to get it done right. And every once in a while, we'd be looking at that shiny thing down the road, and we'd stop ourselves because we had other deadlines we had to take care of. But you know, success certainly influences, you know, a trajectory. And so when the book came out, we knew stories we'd like to tell. We didn't know we'd had an opportunity or even a reason to do it. And then the thing just went bonkers and just sold like crazy, and everybody was freaking out. Then everybody's like, more, you know, and even us, because then it was something that we knew was important to fans, and we knew the stuff that we knew that you guys didn't know. So one of the things that, and there are, how do I do this without getting in trouble? There
Good luck.
are things in the works. But the one thing I can talk about right now is Lost Years. So what Lost Years is, we wanted to do something, and I think Kevin's aptly calling it like a Rogue One type story within this universe. So you know how you have Star Wars and the main movies, but then you have like Rogue One is a Star Wars story. This is a Last Ronin story. So it won't be oversized like Last Ronin was. It'll be, I think we said 28 pages each issue. It's a 5-issue miniseries, but what this is both a prequel and a sequel, all in one book. So what we're going to be able to do is tell a story that we hinted at through Kevin's flashbacks that he drew in the Last Ronin, which is when Mikey found out his entire family was dead, and he also believed April had died. He kind of went on this weird vision quest. He went over to Asia because he went to look for Donatello and Splinter. They were obviously killed, and he thought, I'm just going to walk into the mountains and I'm going to die. Everybody's gone, I'm going to die. But what happened was, this is where we first kind of hint at this idea that there's these secondary mutations that are happening, that the mutations never stopped. And so his body's changing, and his body wouldn't allow him to die, to the point where he finally said, well, you know what, I'm just going to stay here, I'll meditate, I'll just be by myself and figure things out. And as he does, that's when we kind of hinted at this idea that he starts to hear voices. He starts to keep hearing this nagging mission that he has to accomplish, which is that final revenge against the Foot Clan. And so then he gets attacked, and he is going to allow himself to get killed, but he can't. The voice tells him, you got to get up, you've got to keep fighting. He kills these villagers, and this is in the Last Ronin, and he says, you know what? It's time for me to train. It's time for me to take my father's journal, learn how to be this complete warrior, this complete ninja, and go finish this business for my family. And he goes on this westward trek across Asia, Europe, through Africa, and back to the United States. We're going to tell that story. You're going to see what happened to Mikey during that quest. So, and it's like we're talking 16-year quest that he goes across. Simultaneously, in the present, at least in the present in the Ronin world, we left April and Casey Marie in an interesting situation where they've resolved the problem with the Foot Clan, or so it seems. And you might have saw there was 4 little turtles in a little tank that they seem to be maybe mutating or growing. So without any spoilers, we have 4 new turtles that are coming, and this is going to be the story about what Casey Marie and April do moving forward from the end of the Last Ronin alongside those 4 little turtles. But it will also be a 16-year story on their side. And what you will see is how Mikey got to New York, and then you'll also see what happens in New York after Mikey was done and after he passed away. So we're really excited. So we've brought in an artist that I worked with for many years on G.I. Joe, a very talented artist named S.L. Gallant. He's going to be drawing the main story, and then we've got Ben, who will be drawing I shouldn't say the main story, because there's really 2, I consider them both main stories, but he'll be drawing the past story, whereas Ben will be drawing the April and Casey Marie story. So now,
I get to draw the 4 new turtles.
he's going to get redemption. Now he's like, he killed turtles.
Now I'm bringing them back.
We're even. Drop the mic.
So,
Another car.
Yeah. So it's an interesting book because, again, we're dealing with those 2 different timelines. Beyond that, I won't say anything past Lost Years, other than probably within the next week, there's another surprise announcement coming that kind of relates to what we are doing in the Lost Years. So kind of keep an eye on the comic book press. We've all put in our quotes, and they're just going to put the press release out there. So there's more information that will be coming. And over time, obviously, we will be sharing some things, artwork, designs, stuff like that. But it's a really exciting time. And the key for me is that, it's exciting to talk about 4 new turtles, and I think it's going to be a big deal. I think people are really going to, I'm hoping this is kind of like a next generation of turtles. But again, it's not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's kind of like the Ghostbusters. I love all the new Ghostbusters stuff, but come on, it ain't Ghostbusters if Bankman ain't somewhere in the picture, right? You got to have all those 4 guys. Those are the Ghostbusters, and you can have 1,000 Ghostbusters, and I think you should. But there's always those 4 guys that started it all. So you never go away from what got us here, and that's Michelangelo, Raphael, Leonardo, Donatello, Splinter, and their friends. So we've got it's challenging what we're going to do, but we're hoping that this is just the next step in building this new universe, but at the same time celebrating everything that's come before. And I think that's one thing we've done at IDW really well, and Ronin was just a continuation of that, is we never forget where this comes from. We don't. If we change things, it's only because we were inspired by the stuff that came before. We never poo-poo anything, that came before us, because it all matters to me. I think it all counts, and if you're sitting here, Kevin was saying he and Peter were joking around, and here we are all these years later, and I think Turtles is about to hit another renaissance. We're like hitting the new Turtle era. Turtles are like Batman at this point at IDW for sure, but it's like becoming that big. And there's other things going on I can't even talk about that aren't even comics. And I think that's testament to the fact that you get here and you last this long, because whatever started it was such a strong seed. You don't ever forget about that. You celebrate it, and that's what we're gonna do. So we're already, in true typical Kevin and Tom fashion, we're scrambling, but I guess that's how we work, and we'll get there, and it'll get done, and I'm really excited. I think the announcement next week too will get people really fired up.
Yeah.
It's always worth the wait.
I was just my final teaser is the Escosa brothers helped build the Last Ronin universe, and we're not letting them out that easy.
Oh yeah.
We're not done with them yet.
Yeah,
and they're not done with us. They're gonna be back with a vengeance.
We're giving them a little breather for a few minutes. Yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. Well, what questions do we have from the audience?
Don't be shy.
Yeah, come on up. Jump up to the microphone. Yes, sir. Tell us your name and feel free to ask.
My name's Eric. Appreciate all the work that you guys have done with the Turtles, especially with the Last Ronin. So my question comes from an artist's perspective. With all the success that's happening and things like that, you can probably get a good sense of projecting, what future stuff is how it's gonna turn out. But how do you guys stay inspired to kind of just keep delivering the heat, if you will? Thank you.
For me, it's just like, this is what I've always wanted. I'm here. I'm going to do my best job. I'm going to have the best days. I'm going to feel great drawing, put on good music, and just like try to enjoy it instead of having to be that job, that burden, that deadline. It's like, no, remember, this is what you've always wanted. Like, all you have to do is do a good job. And so I focus on that a lot, and all of that is inspiring. And we talked about how we pull from different things for Last Ronin. At first, it was almost a Mirage-y, end of a Mirage story kind of thing. I was pulling from everything. Like, I love the Zero TMNT show, where it's just like, this was the best in this iteration. This guy was so cool in this iteration, and I try to do that with like movie designs or old toy designs or jokes, and putting Kevin and Pete on the subway and things like that. Like, that's inspiring to say, oh, what's the next page going to have, and what can I sneak in there, and how are people going to like it?
Yeah, it's kind of like it starts with the passion, because like Ben was doing Kickstarters and drawing and creating and self-publishing his own work before he came on board with us, which is similar, because Pete and I had just tons of rejection letters, and we were going to do comics one way or another. If it wasn't a Turtle, we'd be doing something in comics. But it's having the passion, and then the rest of it is like, we're all kind of genre junkies, and I think that it's kind of a Kaiser Soze kind of thing. It's like it's amazing where you get ideas from one little spark will lead to another spark, what builds a story and a concept, and especially when I get to work with some really creative people, that's really to me that's inspiring. And even going back to when I went down to meet Tom for the first time, and he had this idea for his version of what we call the IDW Turtle universe, which was taking his favorite parts of different Turtle universes and coming up with things like the reincarnation aspects, building out this whole other foundation to tell stories from multiple Turtle universes. But it was great. It was sort of, he staked his claim, he carved out his turf, and then gave us a place where we could bring in so many elements. And then Tom's fresh ideas and fresh approach to that also mixed with guys like Dan Duncan and Corey Smith and so many artists that came on board initially. That to me is, the old guy in the bunch was super inspiring, because it's like, the old guy's got to raise his game a little bit to keep up with these kids that already draw better than I do. So.
We all do that. I look at San Luco and I'm just like, God.
Mateus, who's out here, buzzing around
us.
somewhere, he's killing it. So. But yeah, inspiration comes from a lot of places. You just got to keep open for it.
For me, inspiration comes out of love, because actually I love the Turtles and I love what I do. It's not like I get it for granted. Like, I'm a comic book artist and I've been doing this for so long, and I'm gonna be doing it for the rest of my life. That's not how we feel. I mean, I'm lucky, and I love what I do. So I'm excited every time that I get a page. because like I've told a couple of you guys, when I got the script, I was excited because I was like a fan, and I was finding out what's gonna happen before you guys. So I was getting ahead of the curve, and then I got the pages, and then I got Ben's designs, and when we did the Donatello story, he sent me, I don't know how many 100 different pictures that I had to come up with the colors, and it's all about finding the right color to put on the uniforms. And I asked Tom for help, and because some of the characters, some of the designs have already been shown, and he gave me a link with all 124 books instead of just giving me the pages. So I had to go through the books and just try to figure out stuff, and I like that. I mean, it sounds like a lot of job and a lot of hours, but it's actually something you enjoy. And when it comes to life and it actually works out, you just feel happy. You just enjoy it. What about you guys?
Yeah, I say that because they both. I was curious how you guys,
What
which
keeps you going?
inspiration is. 'Cause they both draw.
Pues a eso yo lo que quise es que no conocía, solo conocía las tortugas ninja por la caricatura.
Yeah, he only knew the Ninja Turtles because of the 90s cartoon, and the Last Ronin, they didn't have any idea until they found out in the scripts. So it was really exciting to hear discovering the story at the same time that they were getting the scripts. So, like they say, everybody knows that they didn't know the end of the story, and one page before the end of the story, the script, they didn't know what was going to happen. So it's really exciting to keep working on this project because they're building the story and getting to know it at the same time. And that has them really excited to know what's coming.
What made them? What inspired you guys to draw in the first place when you were young?
¿Qué los inspiró a dibujar cuando eran pequeños?
Pues en realidad como crecimos con la televisión.
Because they grew up watching TV and the cartoons, so they watch He-Man, Mazinger Z, Thundercats, and Ninja Turtles. So they were trying to copy what they were seeing on TV, and that's how we started drawing.
A mí,
Sounds familiar.
No, yeah.
a mí me inspira.
He gets inspired
Es que es muy fácil trabajar con Kevin.
because it's really easy to work with Kevin.
Es en serio.
Yeah, he's been serious.
Es muy amable.
He's really kind.
Siempre nos espera.
He's always patient.
Nos ayudó mucho los sketches.
He helped a lot with the sketches.
Que nos presentaba, entonces.
He gave everything to these guys.
Es un equipo muy afortunado.
So it's a team that is very lucky
Hemos trabajado con muchas personas.
because they've worked with a lot of people before.
Y me atrevo a decir
And
que
he can say
es
that
una de las mejores experiencias.
This is one of the best experiences ever.
Aw.
Entonces,
And
pues nos hemos sentido muy bien, pues eso me
So they
motiva.
feel really excited
seguir.
about that because they get motivated by working with
Quisiera seguir
everyone.
por siempre.
And they want to do this forever if you guys keep buying
Well,
it.
we're all mutually inspired, so that's fantastic.
All right, we've only got about 3 or 4 minutes left, so we'll just do quick questions that we'll try to get through everybody just fast as we can. So go right ahead.
Well, you mentioned Turtles Renaissance, and to this date, the best Ninja Turtles movie is probably the original '90s one that's taken right from your comic. If they came to you for another movie, would you pitch Last Ronin as the next movie for Ninja Turtles, or do you think it might be too intense and you might try another story?
We're
I think the
hoping.
time is right for a Last Ronin adaptation of in film form.
I think. Stand by. That's all I'm going to say. I think.
Love it.
He's always
Yeah,
spoiling shit.
And I'm not saying that like in a way I know anything or I'm making any promises, but I certainly know behind the scenes there is talk. There's definitely talk, and I think it's one of those things where it's undeniable how much this means to people, and I think the very fact that there is talk is very hopeful for all of us because I hope it happens.
Jim Henson suits, Judith
Yeah.
Hogue, Elias, live action.
Yeah, go tell Judith she needs to be in the new movie.
Someone tell Judith.
Hey, go right ahead. Yes, sir.
I actually got 2 questions. First one is, what would you give for advice for future Ninja Turtle artists who want to follow in the footsteps of you guys?
¿Qué consejo les darían a los siguientes artistas?
The-
que siguen, que tienen
the,
que ver con ustedes?
it's like anything, you know, because this concept applies to anything, whether you want to be a writer, a colorist, an artist, penciler, inker, musician, sports star. It really is like, you know, when you find the passion, if you have the passion in this market, it's like trying to find time in every day to apply it to your craft. And I know it can be really hard if you're working full time, you have a relationship or a family, and you have so many different components you like. But if you got to try to set aside that 20 minutes, 30 minutes or more, if you can get away with it, to practice, because it's, you know, that's the only way you're going to get better is practice, practice, practice. And it really does. It sounds like, oh yeah, we know that part, but the reality is, unfortunately, it's true. It's just you got to really spend the time and then and do that. Because, you know, when I was a kid, I copied and traced everything. I stole from everybody, you know, and eventually it's sort of, and that was just the passion that leads you down the path.
And we're down to 2 minutes. Do you mind if the folks behind you ask another question real quick so we try to
I'll
get them in? Is that
tell you
okay?
later.
Yeah. Well, sorry, but thank you.
Yeah, ask them. We're going to be back signing right after this. So if we met, you know, don't be shy to ask at the table too. So.
Hi, my question is for Kevin. Was Michelangelo always the last Ronin? Because we had Plastron Cafe with Old Time Story where Donatello was the last turtle.
This, you know, that was the fun part of like the Mirage universe and the universe that's that we've had. Because I always loved this idea that, you know, when people say, "Oh, you guys have these, you know, multiple these different universes within the Turtles universe, like multi-dimensional kind of thing, like which has become very common." That idea is something we stole very early on from the Marvel universe or the DC universe. There's always multiple Superman storylines or Batman storylines or Spider-Man or stuff. So when we explored Turtles in different universes, different story ideas, a lot of times it was artists would bring us ideas that would work within the framework of the Turtle universe that we call Tales of the Turtles, or like Plastron Cafe was this great exploration of different ideas. But in particular to Last Ronin, as Tom and I built out the story, and it was, to me, there was never a question when we sat down and we said, the first turtle born is going to be the Last Ronin, not only because we loved the idea that he, in the perception of what we know as Michelangelo, he had the furthest distance to go. So he's kind of unlikely, but emotionally and psychologically, he had to go the furthest to arrive at this character, because people would say, oh, it's going to be Raphael as the Last Ronin, or this. So in this particular multiverse of the Turtles, as Michelangelo as the Last Ronin, there was never a doubt for us. So
awesome.
Yeah. Thanks,
and it's 3 o'clock. We're getting the high sign from the folks. They got to jump into the next room. If you want to hang around, we'll try to try to get your question. But how about a big round of applause for the Last Ronin team here? Well, thank you, guys.